First, let's do an overview of the RFP process. RFP process. I'm sorry. RFP, or request for proposal, is a formal announcement to vendors asking them to respond to your stated needs. The length and complexity of the RFP depends upon the type of library and the needs. In other words, the more complex, the larger the library, of course, the needs are also going to be, the RFP is going to be also more complex because you're going to have more needs. Vendor provides costs for the software, hardware installation, data conversion, hosting services, add-ons, and training. And this will depend also on the type of implementation that you are looking for. If you're doing turnkey, if you're doing hosted, if you're doing open source. Benefit of the RFP is that you have in writing from the vendor what the ILS will do or will not do. And this is very important because once you do your RFP and you send that to your vendors, you will have in writing from the vendor what they are the product they are offering, what is the potential of the product they are offering. RFP is the foundation for a contract. Yes, much of the information that is going to be in the RFP will be in the contract too. Once the RFP is issued, there are no do-overs. This is a legal process that follows strict guidelines. Therefore, you have to be very careful when you do your RFP. Being specific, you have to be very specific in terms of the needs of your library. The beginning of the RFP should state what type of RFP is being issued. The opening paragraph, and these are some examples, tells the vendors that the bids are sealed and must be addressed to a specific person at a library. So once you put your request for proposal, vendors will bid on that proposal, and they have to send to the library in a closed envelope to a specific person in your library. Tell what type of ILS the library is looking for, and that has to do with the types. Again, hosted, turnkey, full, open source, if that is the case, etc., etc. Sales reps view the beginning of the RFP to determine whether or not their companies are able to bid. Yeah, because different companies offer different solutions, so they have to be sure that they can offer you what you're looking for. The library should clarify in the opening statement who should be contacted regarding questions that arise during the reading of the RFP. Only one person should be designated to be the contact. Yeah, it is very important to have one person designated in your organization, in your library, to respond to the RFPs, to the vendors. If too many people are answering questions about the RFP and misinformation is given, this could have legal ramifications for the library. And this is very important because you have to treat all your vendors the same, and you have to provide the same information for each of them. Therefore, it's always a good idea to have a specific person to deal with the vendors. Do not bend or break the rules at any time during the RFP process, or vendors can later cry foul. Writing the RFP, a statement of overall purpose and objective of the integrated library system process. Short, comprehensive statement about what type of system the library is planning to purchase. Overview of the library, branches and population served. Give a description of the community and surrounding areas that the library serves. System capacity requirements for the library. Provide details on the annual material budget plus the number of bibliographic records, item records, patron records, staff workstations, public internet workstations, and online public access catalog. In other words, you have to provide the vendor with information, with the most complete, up-to-date information in the RFP. Why? Because that way the vendors can offer you a product that will be able to handle your workload. Also, and we will see that records are very important, because remember, one of the things that the vendor will have to do is to provide for the migration of those records from the legacy system to the new implementation. Goals of the new ILS list the functions, attributes, and features that staff are looking for in the new integrated library system. Description of library's computer network, hardware, and software that also will provide the information needed for the vendor. And he will request what upgrades you need to do to implement their system. Work with your technology person on this part of the RFP. If you have a technology person, of course, it's always a good idea to work with the technology person, because that person is more familiar with the legacy system. Give information on the library's hardware and software, including the equipment that runs the library's network and current automation system of ILS. Writing the RFP, current ILS or automation system. Provide details about your current implementation or automation system being used. This will include the version you are running and the basic capabilities of the system. Time for the RFP and project. A timeline, and this is very important too, for the project. Give the vendors an idea of a time frame under the library is operating. Let me fix this here. Operating. Important note. There are always bugs to correct when converting from one type of ILS to another, and this has to do with the migration of bibliographic records and patron records from the old system to the new system, from the legacy system to the new implementation. Automation companies have proprietary software that can sometimes cause difficulties in the conversion process until everything is fine-tuned. Put it ED here, I think it's better. Make sure that you obtain detailed information about the conversion process. If not done correctly, your library will have a lot of cleanup to do, and it is not pretty. And this is again in regards to your records. Okay, but remember that's an information that belongs to the library. So the idea is that you have to migrate your records from the old system to the new system, and that can bring about some problems. So you have to be very careful about that. System specifications, general description of the desired system, what you're looking for, state your overall expectations from an ILS, and vendor implementation plan. Request that the vendor supply detailed information about the project timeline and how components of that process will be handled. In other words, the vendors who are part of the bidding process will have to supply a timeline for implementation. Basic system requirements. It is important that you communicate the basic requirements that vendors must meet. Okay, so if vendors want to participate in the bidding process, they have to meet basic requirements, and those basic requirements will be a part of your RFP. It's like the baseline that they have to aim at. You do not want any surprises after a vendor is awarded the bid. Okay. The library needs to retain ownership of its own data and be able to easily export bibliographic and customer records with no additional charges. We have seen when we did the review of ILS systems, some companies do charge an amount in cents per record. So it depending on the size of your library, you want to make sure that that migration of records will be either free or as inexpensive as possible, especially when you're talking about thousands of records. Remember, and this is a word of warning for all of you, especially in regards to your patrons record. Remember that that information belongs to the library. However, the library have to keep confidentiality of those records. So make sure that the company you're dealing with will honor that confidentiality, because you have personal information on patrons on members of your community. So if you have to share that information with the vendor in order to export or migrate those records, make sure that those records will be kept confidential. Okay, basic system requirements. If you're purchasing hardware from the vendor, you will want the company to respond to specific questions. If you need the vendor to install the servers and to load the software, you need assurances that the RFP that the company has qualified technicians to perform that service, of course. You will also want assurances that the hardware and the software is scalable, meaning that it can grow as your organization or your library grows. Basic system requirements. Power failures or server failures need to be addressed. And this is very important. You have to have a backup plan, and it should include a UPS. This is for your RFP. Okay, the server needs to utilize RAID, redundant array of independent disks, so that all of your library data is backup and retrievable. Be sure to tell the vendor how fast your internet system can communicate. For example, i.e. 100 Mbps Ethernet connection. Also, be sure to ask the vendor for the ability to communicate with other library servers through a Z39.50 complaint channel, and that means that you will be able to share information and bibliographic records. Basic system requirements. Remote authentication for patrons. It's important, of course. You want your patrons to be able to access your online catalog and also to log in into your system, for example, for checking out electronic resources, and also to reserve, for example, books and other printed materials. What it is important, on the other hand, is that you have a good security system, because you don't want other people that because if you don't have a good security system, you may be subject to being attacked by hackers. So you need a good firewall and you need virus protection. And one implementation calls for at least 3 servers. The web page server, that's where you're going to have your website and your online catalog, the data server, and the domain control server. Okay, of course, these 3 servers, they can be 3 physically machines, or they can be also virtual servers, and it will depend on the implementation, because if you're implemented a hosted system, you won't have the servers on your site. They will be at the vendor's site. Training and documentation. Training on how to use the new ILS is, of course, very important, and it says here this is one of the items most overlooked. Well, make sure you don't overlook that, because you need training for your staff on how to use the new integrated library system. Vendor should provide a list of all expenses related to training, including any travel, hotel rooms, and meals they plan to add to the cost of the training sessions. Ask for follow-up training, since it is difficult to absorb everything all at once. It is also very important that in your RFP you ask for training when the system upgrades in the future. Okay, training, it's and I want to emphasize this, there is never enough training. The system support, if the library has existing electronic customer and bibliographic record, you will want these records to be loaded into the new integrated library system. I think we already mentioned about migration of those records. Ask in the RFP if is the vendor able let me correct this, to load the current records, and if bibliographic records will be loaded and indexed according to the standard MARC format. I think that's a given, and but in any case you have to request that in your RFP. If you have servers on site at the library, you may want the ILS company to have the ability to connect remotely to the servers in order to troubleshoot problems, install upgrades, and perform routine maintenance. This is also a given, because if you are installing new software that you are buying from a vendor, they will have to be able to access remotely your servers to update those systems, and also to troubleshoot too. System support, hours of operation for the company's technical support may be of critical importance, and normally we will be looking here at 24/7. If technical support needs to be available 24/7 during emergencies, make that request in the RFP. This is something that we should be able to make, especially when we're dealing with libraries that may be open 24/7. The vendor should be responsible for all hardware that it provides and give assurances that the equipment is new, of course. Vendor should be responsible for contacting the third party when repairs are needed. And this is very important, because you don't want to buy hardware or peripherals, output or input devices through the vendor, and then when something goes wrong, the vendor is not responsible and it tells you to go directly to the manufacturer. No. If you buy through the vendor, he's got to be responsible for contacting the third party. Modules. RFP should list the requirements for each of the modules and add-ons that the library plans to purchase from an ILS vendor. Basic modules, and these are the basic modules. We have cataloging, circulation, public access, catalog, the OPAC, and reports. And some add-ons that should, in my opinion, should be basic modules too, are the serials, acquisitions, and of course email notice for reserved items, overdue fines, etc. Circulation module, library already barcoded. You want the new ILS to be able to read and the current barcode. So in other words, what it says there, if you are already barcoding your resources, then you want the new ILS to be able to read the current barcodes. Why? Because you don't want to change to a new system. Ability to toggle from a check-in screen to the checkout screen, and this is very important because when you are doing checkouts and check-ins, you don't want to go from one module to another. You want to be able to work in the same module, and you only have to switch screens because this is more efficient. Ability to print due date slips if needed. You don't always want to do that because you may also have the ability to send the due date by email, for example, and then it will save you money instead of printing every transaction. Circulation transactions are immediately updated to the OPAC. This is very important because once an item is checked out, you want that to be reflected in your OPAC. Circulation module will continue to perform at the circulation desk and self-serve workstation in the event of a lost connection to the network and to the server. Circulation module, policies and loan rules. You want to be able to easily change policies and loan rules. In other words, you want to program the software in accordance to your library policies in terms of loan rules or fines, etc. Checkout. It is helpful to have a system that can search for borrower records by various fields: name, address, email, driver's license number, telephone number, etc. So in the module, in the Patreon module, you want to have the ability to search by fields. Check-in. Let's fix this. Check-in. No, I think it's check-in. To conserve paper at the expense of purchasing receipt paper, it is important that the circulation staff have the ability to print or not print a receipt. And this is what I was saying before. And if you have seen many commercial stores are now emailing the receipt to your account. So that's something that you want to have implemented in your ILS. Borrower records. You want to be able to block records. If the library blocks patrons who have overdue materials, lost items, or fines, then you want the circulation module to notify employees of a block when viewing a borrower's record. And this, of course, it's very important because you don't want to give out any resource to a patron who hasn't returned something in the past or who still haven't paid fines. Other helpful alerts: messages, overdue items, renewal items, and arrival of reserve materials. These are some of the alerts that your ILS have to provide. Fines and overdue. Flexibility in fine payments is important, so you have to let that, but that will be also part of your policies and norms in your organization and library. Okay, but if you have that flexibility, make sure that you can program that into your ILS. Fines may vary by material type. If a detailed receipt for payment needs to be provided for patrons, make that request in the RFP, and I think that's very important. And we already mentioned that they can be also emailed to. Patron information. Vendors must tell you whether they can accept your current patron records in the format you can provide, or if there will be problems importing the existing records. And this is very important. I don't see many problems when you have a standard bibliographic record, but with your patron records there may be a problem in terms of migrating the records from the old system or the legacy system to the new ILS implementation. So make sure you request that in your RFP. And these are an example of some of the fields that need to be migrated: last name, first name, street address, email, phone, gender, barcode number, birthday, parent's name, and you can have others too, such as driver's license, proof of residence, etc. Notice and other functions. Overdue notice, billing notice, and hold notice are the most common type of notices generated by the ILS. In terms of the OPAC or PAC, it is essential that changes made in the circulation and public access catalog modules happen in real time. I think we already mentioned that one. The library should have the ability to control the look of the OPAC and the pack. That's very important because you want to have control over the interface of your website and of your public access catalog. Patron authentication is a software feature that takes a borrower's library card number and compares it to the library database of customer records. If there is a match, the customer is allowed to use electronic resources. We mentioned that at the beginning that you need to implement, or the ILS needs that implementation when your patrons can access resources remotely, and they can check electronic resources such as databases and ebooks, etc. So authentication of patrons is a very important feature for contemporary libraries. You need a report module because it is very important to be able to provide statistical numbers on library usage. So the reports module needs to create reports that are required by your facility. Reports should be able to display in a variety of formats: PDF, HTML, CSV, and XLS. Project management and organization. The RFP states that selected vendors will designate a single project manager to work with the library throughout the installation process. This is very important. Communication is essential, and too many people trying to communicate spells disaster. So it is very important that you have one person in the vendors in the company of the vendor selected to work with you for the implementation and also for support. Because as it says here in the slide, communication is essential for any human process. Okay, and if there are too many people involved in the implementation, in the training, in the technical support, etc., then it will cause a lot of confusion. So that would be a good idea to have a explicit point person to work with you throughout the whole process. Instructions to vendors. Every RFP needs to contain a section with instructions to the vendor regarding the submission of the RFP, how the proposal will be evaluated, and how to contact if the vendor wishes to submit a question, lodge a protest, or conduct a site inspection. State the submission deadline for the RFP, including the date and time, along with the mailing address and information for the opening seal proposals, because several companies will be bidding on your RFP. So you want to make sure that they all know the process of evaluating their bids. You want to make a transparent process. Instructions to vendors. Envelope must be clearly marked integrated library system proposals. It is important to have more than one individual at the opening of the sealed bids to be a witness to the procedure. That's of course part of the transparency. Evaluation of the proposals is the sole responsibility of the library. The evaluation process must be fair, and the same standards apply to each proposal. So that's part again of having a fair process. The library may wish to publish its evaluation process, or at least its criteria, so that each vendor knows the criteria by which it will be judged. Okay, so it is very important again to have a fair process where every vendor will have the same chance of or opportunity to win the bid. Cost proposal. The cost proposal must state all costs associated with the system, including but not limited to the installation, software, hardware, data conversion, migration, training, maintenance fees, and any other miscellaneous charges. Vendors need to state in the RFP any requirements expected from the library, such as preparing the site, hardware specifications, operating system, browser types and versions, wiring, cabling, telephone lines, etc. So the vendor should also tell the library what it needs to be done in order for their product, their implementation to work well. And that also here we can add training, staff, etc. Public record requirements. If the library is supported by tax dollars, then all business transactions are subject to the open records law of your state. So this is a process that have to be transparent and it have to be open to the community. If the vendor wants other information in the RFP to be kept confidential, besides the cost quoted, then the vendor should mark each page as confidential. So as we have been seeing, this is a very complex process, and it is a very complex process because there is a lot of money involved in the implementation of the new ILS system. Evaluation process, it has three phases. Vendors meet the deadline with complete proposals. Proposals undergo a detailed evaluation. Finalists may or may not be invited to present a demonstration of the ILS depending on if the library deems it necessary. In my opinion, they should be invited to present a demonstration. All of them, the finalists. And here are some of the criteria on how to evaluate or weight each category. Financial history of the company and its customer base, 10%. It is very important that you deal with a strong company. Project management and reference from similar type of libraries, 15%. In my opinion, this is the most important criteria. So you want to have similar type libraries as yours, and you want to make sure that you want to have good references. So I would add more weight to this category, at least 10%. Cost of the ILS, of course, this is a given. If you can pay, it's fine. If you can, I mean, there's no way that you can consider that product. Ability to meet specifications in the RFP and support, 50% at least or even more. Before the library awards a contract, it reserves the right to request a demonstration for the proposed system. Again, I will always do this before the selection of a finalist or finalist has been completed. This is something that I always request. And to me, one of the most important, everything is important here in terms of weight, but reference from similar libraries is very, very important, because you want to make sure that the ILS works well. But everything it's important. The contract, once the library has selected and notified a vendor, the contract process is the next step. The vendor issues the contract, and here I would add that in my opinion, again, because this is a process, a very complex process, and involve probably public monies, that you have a lawyer reviewing the contract too. The contract is issued electronically, so it can be modified easily. Under no circumstances should the vendor be allowed to keep the following statement in the contract. For example, this is very important. You don't want this statement to be in the contract. The vendor will not be held accountable to the contents of the RFP. Well, if that it's added there in the contract, you are in, and you sign the contract, you are in very bad shape, because you want to be able that to hold the vendor accountable for the contents of the RFP. So, because this is what you're looking for. Remember, the RFP is telling the vendors what your needs are and what your expectations are on implementing the integrated library system. So they should be held accountable. The contract should also read that all bibliographic, fine, patron, and other records entered into the library database or supplied to the vendor are and shall be remain the sole property of the library. And this is very important because this is an issue of confidentiality. You don't want your patron's record to be used for other purposes. So make sure that the contract states very clearly that that your records are the library records and should not be used for any other purpose other than migrating or doing the process of migrating from the old system, from your legacy system, to the new implementation. In addition, the library has the right to extract its data without the vendor's permission. That you should be the library should keep all the rights of their information. The contract should also state that the licensed software will not suffer from systematic errors that renders unable to perform as intended. The vendor should also cover the cost, including travel, if the system have to be repaired on site due to errors in the software and or the hardware. Okay, so let's see what the bottom line here is. The bottom line: make sure that the library includes every detail in the RFP. Again, remember, the RFP tells the vendor what the state of your system is, what your needs are, and what your expectations are on the new ILS. So everything has to be spelled out very clearly there. And the contract, so that there are no surprises, because you don't want any surprise. You're committing to a new system, a new implementation, and you expect the vendor to fulfill your expectations. So everything has to be spelled out in the contract. That is why I said I wouldn't hesitate to consult a lawyer. This is a time-consuming process that needs great detail. Picking the wrong system spells disaster. Yes, this is you have to take that into consideration all the time. So we have reviewed what the writing the request for proposal and reviewing the contract is. This corresponds to chapter 9 in your text